Hey guys, this is Bharadwaj with Fonearena.com and this is the Lenovo Vibe Z that we have been taking a look at recently. You may have seen a number of videos in which we discussed about the Lenovo Vibe Z's features, including the camera. You might have seen the camera review and the camera samples that we put up. It is indeed a really good camera. So over at the back we have a 13 megapixel unit that takes beautiful pictures, but for pro users there's always a chance of taking a better picture. Yes, if you know the camera interface, if you know how to work around the photographic situations and constraints posed by a mobile phone camera, they can obviously take better pictures. And that's exactly what this video is all about. We are going to tell you how to take better pictures in certain conditions which are a challenge for a mobile phone, or working around some faults that come associated with any camera. So that's what we are going to see in the tips and tricks video of Lenovo Vibe Z. If you had seen our review, we said that the shutter button is not perfect. As you can see, it doesn't work that well even with a very small change in the distance between the shutter button and our finger. So it's a bit unresponsive at times, and to work around this, we found that there is a setting inside the settings menu, other settings. You can see that there is a volume key option that can change to capture, zoom or sound. So what you can do is, if you set this to capture, a volume plus will take a capture. As you saw, I just pressed the volume up button at the bottom here and it took a photo. Just like that, very easy. And again you can take a photo. But the volume down is a bit special. Hold it and press the shutter button and it can take a 10 burst. So that's a burst photo of 10 photos, and you can select which one you want and use them. So that's the burst mode on the burst mode shortcut using the volume rocker. So it's pretty helpful when you consider that you can do a lot more than just pressing the shutter button when you use the volume controls. So that's a tip I wanted to share with you, just to work around the unresponsive software button that at times makes you miss the moment that you want to capture. That is our tip number 1. Now moving on to tip number 2, I want to tell you that the phone comes with a lot of advanced settings, like for example metering. So light metering is a very integral part of calculating the scene and taking a photo. It is usually center weighted. As you can see now, the exposure does not change according to whatever is in the scene. It changes according to the center. So if I move up, you can see the exposure is coming down, and if I move down, the exposure is coming up, because the center of the frame reads the scene and appropriately sets the exposure settings. That's what happens during light metering. But if you want to achieve special effects or creative manipulation of the photo, for example, if you want to take a photo with high brightness like this, you need to use spot metering. So that's how it works. Spot metering, as you can see, the point linked metering is the option to enable this kind of metering, which is on. So whatever you press in, it will take the average of the center of that and take the exact exposure settings for that. And you can also choose spot metering, which is even more accurate. As you can see, the place I focus in is directly taken for the photo. So I can click a photo with this kind of exposure if I wanted. So this looks like two toys in a vacuum or standing on a piece of white thing. That is not actually the photo here, but if I wanted creative manipulation like this, I would have to choose spot metering, because that would bring out the exact details of a shot when clicked on. For example, the portion of the bike will be extremely clearly visible, and if I want to underexpose the photo, I don't want the bike to be as bright, I can just click on the brightest part and it will take me to the darker shot. So that's how you creatively manipulate a photo using spot metering. Your options are inside advanced settings, and you can choose the light metering option to spot metering, or you can use just center weighted if you wanted, and use the point linked metering to on or off. Let's keep it on for the while. That was tip number 2, and we hope you use this tip to creatively manipulate your photos. Anyway, moving on to tip 3, we saw how you can manipulate the exposure using spot metering like this, but how do you feel if you want it to be more than that? For example, you want more creative manipulation of the photo, of the exposure. Exposure is the hardest thing to master on a mobile phone because of the obvious constraints. You don't have control over shutter speed, you don't have control over the other aspects like aperture, which is fixed on a phone, but you do have control for ISO. Yes, in advanced settings, you might have seen that ISO settings is obviously an option. It comes with all the mobile phone sensors. What ISO is just increasing the electron volt output of the sensor. The sensor can capture only that amount of photons, but if you want to boost it, you need to increase the electron volt, the photon gathering capacity of the photosites on the sensor. So that's exactly what ISO means. Sensitivity. You can increase the sensitivity of the sensor or leave it on auto, but for creative manipulation, you can indeed increase the sensor's sensitivity. As you can see here, I've increased the sensor sensitivity and the whole scene feels brighter. That's how ISO works, but it does also introduce a bit of a grain. For example, if you want to have a decently exposed photo, but in very low light, you can use ISO 1600, which will introduce a lot of grainy noise because of the higher electron volt output. It obviously introduces noise, but still you get a usable photo. That is how it works. Or if you want really low ISO, you can choose ISO 100, which will have nearly noiseless performance in terms of image quality. Also, the lowest ISO always brings out the best of the sensor. So if you want to have the neatest, clearest pictures, you can set the ISO to 100. So that is our tip number 3. You can use creative manipulation of the ISO for your own photos. Let's turn it back to auto. Auto works best for most of the times, but if you feel that you want to have a dim picture, for example, you're taking in sunset and it's like extremely overexposed, even with spot metering, you can obviously use ISO to lower it down further. So that's how it works. ISO, when in auto, it works along with metering. When set in manual, you can creatively manipulate the image. So that was our tip number 3. Let's move on to tip number 4, taking better low light shots. Well, this is a bit tricky for all mobile phones. For example, this is a well lit indoor shot and it takes very great pictures in this mode. But for low light mode, Lenovo has done some special things in hardware as well as software. So in hardware, this lens has a f1.8 aperture. That's a huge thing for a mobile phone. A lens does not usually have 1.8 aperture. Usually it turns around at 2 or 2.2, but 1.8 gathers more light into the sensor, which is good for low light photography. So even in normal mode, the low light with harsh lighting is very good on the Lenovo Vibe Z. You can check out the camera samples. We'll have the camera review links below in the description. But then Lenovo has this mode called the super night mode. So in the normal night mode, what happens is that the normal mode, not the normal night mode, beg your pardon. The normal mode, what happens is that the actual data is being preserved with noise. So if I take a photo at a low light condition, it will take the photo with less light and more noise. But what if you wanted to take a decent photo in low light? That's where the night mode comes in. The super night mode, as it is called, is something very useful to take usable low light pictures. For example, what it does is that it removes the noise by processing and takes in a little bit of more light through lowering the shutter speed. So if you can keep the phone really steady, it'll take a better picture with less noise, but some of the details will be lost. That is the one compromise that you have to make with the super night mode. So the super night mode is Lenovo's own solution for taking low light pictures which are usable. But if you want your own solution, you can obviously go through the advanced settings, set the ISO high to 1600. If you don't care about grain, then this is the way to take low light pictures without using any mode, without using aggressive noise reduction. If you want to take usable photos in low light, then set the ISO to anything above 400. It will take better pictures than the auto mode, and you will end up with some noise which is very distracting for some. But if you don't mind, if you mind maybe processing them in a different photo processor, then probably you can use that for noise reduction. A better noise reduction perhaps, maybe you have better noise reduction techniques. So in that case, use the ISO. But the third and the most different method is me suggesting you use the HDR mode. So as you can see, the super night mode also has a mode here, and there is also the HDR. HDR works very similarly to what HDR stands for. It's higher dynamic range, let it be daylight or low light. As you can see now, it's a pretty dark image, but when I take the image, it takes 3 exposures, -1, 0 and +1, and merges them into a single picture, giving you the actual scene. So this happens in daylight as well as low light. For example, in low light, it will automatically increase the exposure to +1, which will actually increase the brightness of this image, and also have the lower noise part in -1. So what happens is, when fusing it, the brighter parts get illuminated and the darker parts get less noisy. That's how it works, the HDR mode. It doesn't work perfectly all the time in low light, but if you find that you have a lot of highlights in the scene, then taking a low light shot would in HDR mode would be a lot better. So 3 modes I told you: super night mode, using the ISO, and then using the HDR mode for low light shots. These are the 3 ways to take a usable low light shot based on your preferences on the Lenovo Vibe Z. So that's our tip number 4. And finally, coming to tip number 5, this is going to be fun because this mode is literally hidden in the Vibe Z camera. You can see that when I hit the extension, the menu opens up to reveal 4 modes. You might be very familiar with these modes. These modes are present on most of these phones lately. Eraser. Also, all these extension lenses take you to different viewfinders. As you can see, the viewfinder has changed. It removes moving objects after the image is taken. So that's how it works. Very simple. Takes a burst of images and removes the moving image by computing what moves. So that's how it works. And then you have the other extension lenses group, which lets you change the face of any one's expression in a group. It takes a burst of images and lets you choose the right one. Again, that's how it works. Thanks to Snapdragon 800, everything was fast. And then you have the GIF and the magic GIF mode. GIF or GIF, whatever you're going to call it. Let me just shake the bobble head of it's still shaking. I'm not sure if you can see in the video, but the bobble head is still shaking, and you can take a GIF of that. So I'm done taking GIF, and it lets me select the images. It takes a burst again and lets me select the images, and this is how it works. And you can see the head bobbling there. So you can play it in reverse, play it in ascending or descending as the software calls it, and you can also make it fast or slow. So that's how the GIF or GIF maker works on the Lenovo Vibe Z camera. This is the extension lens that will let you take all these pictures. You can also use the front facing camera for taking a GIF. And then you have the last one, the magic GIF. The magic GIF works very similarly to the GIF, but lets you animate certain parts of the image. So this is very similar to Nokia's cinematograph. For example, let's take this image now. The head is bobbling. It is processing. It takes some time to process because this is a magic GIF, which is basically a cinematograph. So that's the moving part of the GIF. So I can edit this and choose the moving part by painting on it. So for example, if this is the moving part, I can paint it and that will work. So it does take a long time. As you can see, that's the only part that will have the bobbling. So anyway, that's the magic GIF mode, very similar to the one on the Nokia Lumias called the cinemagram or cinematograph basically. So that was our tip number 5. I don't know if you have seen that in the Vibe Z Camera, but it does exist and does work well. So those are the 5 tips and tricks for making better photos on the Lenovo Vibe Z. That brings us to the end of this video. Do hit the like button if you like this video, and do hit the subscribe button if you want more videos like these. Thanks for watching, and let us know what you think in the comment section below.